What's up, everybody? Have you ever wished that your deck had a little bit more seating or maybe some extra storage? Or how about just a nice flower planter? In this video, I've got you covered. I'll go through step by step how I built this planter bench that not only looks great, but saves a ton of space. Now, before we get into it, as a small YouTuber, 500 subscribers is a huge milestone and we are almost there. So if you've learned anything from me, or you're inspired, or you just like who I am, consider subscribing. All right, let's get into it.
I have a ground level deck with a upper and lower section, which means there's a single step between the two levels. Next to this step is this ground level garden that does nothing but grow weeds. So my plan is to dig up the garden and prep that area to be the base for my planter bench. It's no wonder nothing grew in here, it's all rocks. I have to dig about 2 feet down by about 7 feet wide, which made for about 6 or 7 wheelbarrows full of dirt. Is it wheelbarrow or wheelbarrow? I don't know. What do you call it?
It's getting hot out. I'm out of shape. Could be both. Now, like all good home improvement projects, there's always a surprise. My surprise is there's an old deck foundation here and it's all concrete. My easy digging project turned into a sledgehammering project. It's all right. It's what we do.
Now that I've busted out the concrete footings, I'm going to dig a little deeper to create some drainage holes. The dirt here has a lot of clay in it, so if it were to ever flood, I want the water to have somewhere to go.
All right, well, we're finally all dug out here, and now we can actually see how this thing was built. When I designed it, I had a rough idea of what was underneath the dirt, but at the end of the day, it was a guess. It's built the way I expected it, except I was really hoping to see some wood here and over here behind me. So I'm gonna sister on another 4x6 to the bottom of this, and that will give me the structure for my floor. I'm gonna call it a floor. It's not really a floor, but I don't wanna store stuff directly on the dirt. So once I have the beams in place, I can add some rails and then I can add some deck slats so I can actually have some wood to put my stuff on. So not everything's sitting on the dirt. That gives me clearance, that gives me some drainage.
Now that I'm all dug out, I can actually start building the base of the bench. All of these deck boards are pretty warped, so I need to cut them back to expose the 4x6 below. I remove as many deck screws as I can, and then use a circular saw to cut about 5 inches back. Some of the deck screws are so buried, the boards need a couple wangs and bangs to encourage them to come out. Many of the deck screws are way too stripped to come out, so I'll have to cut them back with an angle grinder. With our work area cleaned up, we can start putting down our first pieces of lumber. These beams are 4x6 pressure treated pine. By adding 2 beams to the existing base, I end up with a 20-inch seated height, which is about the maximum you want for a seated height. Cutting dense pressure treated beams like this puts a lot of load on the miter saw motor, especially when you work on an extension cord. So by making small, shallow cuts instead of one big one, it'll help you avoid popping a fuse. Now, if there's one thing this base is not, it's level. It's out of level in every direction.
Oh, God.
Over 8 feet, it's almost 3 inches out of level. So that 20-inch seated height is gonna turn into something bigger.
Perfect.
So instead of having one giant gap, I decided to split the difference between 2. My plan is to come back with some sort of trim and cover up these gaps, so it's not as obvious how out of level this thing was. I do my best to make sure everything is level and square, which will make the rest of the build so much easier. Now that it's finally level, the seated height ended up being about 22 inches, which is high for a chair, but okay for a bench. It'll do. Now I can focus on the seat of the bench. The way this bench is designed, the seating has about a 7-foot span that is unsupported. I chose to do this to give me as much storage space under the bench as possible. I don't want to rely on the strength of boards toe-nailed into the sides. so I add ledger boards to the interior perimeter, much like building a deck. This bench is large enough to fit 3 adults, so I want to make sure it can support at least 500 pounds, maybe 1,000, 2,000 if your mom's coming over. I set this 2x6 about 16 inches from the front, which is your typical seated depth, so that dimension will be right. These miniature joists rest on the ledger board and attach to that back 2x6. I probably don't need this many, but I'm building this thing overkill for the sake of safety. I spent some time getting everything nice and square again, and once I'm happy, each 2x6 gets 3 decking screws. One 2x6 over 7 feet has a little bit of squish to it, and that's not great. So I'm going to sister on another 2x6 and attach it with 2 6-inch leg screws per joist, which is 12 leg screws in total, each rated at 1,000 pounds of shear strength. That's pretty strong. And now, this thing is steady as a rock. Now that I have a strong base, I can focus my attention upwards, which means building the planter and the doors. My design calls for the planter to be 42 inches tall, which is the typical height for a standing table. This planter serves 3 purposes. The first, it will be the back of the bench. The second, it's the frame for the doors. Third, well, it's a planter. Everything gets assembled with pressure-treated 2x4s and decking screws. Nothing fancy here. Now this planter will not be filled with dirt. Instead, I'm using drop-in planters. My planters are 8 inches tall, so I'm building the inside of the planter 8 inches tall. Sitting at a 90-degree angle is not very comfortable, so I'm going to add a 15-degree angle to the back. So I put together a tapering jig for my table saw. This makes cutting long, angled cuts pretty easy. These are finicky little pieces of wood though, so everything gets pre-drilled before I screw them in. I'm using more of the 4x6s to build up the outside frame. This gives it this nice, sturdy look that I was going for. I use the same 6-inch leg screws and overdrive them about halfway through the 4x6 to connect to the 4x6 below. Here I am imagining what it's like to have doors. Ooh. The doors are built like a simple gate door. They'll never be seen, but they need to be strong. Now this door is heavy, so this 45-degree board helps transfer the load back down to the hinges. I panicked for a moment because I thought I built one of the doors the wrong size. Then I realized I'm an idiot. Putting on the gate hardware was a massive pain in the ass, and I don't even realize how big of a mistake I'm making right now. But for now, the doors fit tight. Too tight.
Put your fingers in that, apparently.
With the frame built, I can close up the planter bench. All the exterior boards are 1 3/8 extra thick pressure-treated decking boards. These boards are a little thicker than normal decking boards, and that helps cut down on the warping. I want to maximize the seating depth, so I'm letting this front board hang over by an additional inch. That means I need to notch around this 4x6. You can do this cut with a jigsaw, but my preference is a circular saw and finishing it with a handsaw. I'm switching to a different type of deck screw. This type of screw has a unique dual thread that tightens the boards better than a normal thread. They also have a small trim head, so they're not as obvious from a distance. To space the boards from one another, I'm just using the thickness of my square. Pressure-treated boards will shrink over time, so this gap will get bigger. Not every board is straight though, but by attaching the board on either end and using a pry bar in the middle, you can bend it back pretty straight. Now the front was pretty easy to do, but the back's a little harder because I have to work around the doors. Originally, I thought I could put the boards right over the top of the doors and they would work just fine. But then this nice bee came along and told me, you can't do that, the doors won't open. Bees! That means I have to take off the hinges and start again. Which, in retrospect, it's pretty obvious that this wouldn't have worked. But here we are. I'm not proud to say how long this took to figure out, but now I have a new problem. The doors won't close. So once again, I have to take the doors off and cut a huge 45-degree return cut to make them fit. But now they look how I want, and they work as they should, so I can shift my attention back to trimming out the bench. I ripped down some of the leftover deck boards to create my own trim. I use this to cover up some of the big gaps or iffy cuts. But remember, this is pressure-treated wood used outside. This is not fine woodworking. Sometimes good enough is just that. Good enough. I come back with some 40 grit sandpaper to knock down the rough edges and the harsh corners. Mother Nature will do the rest. As I put the last pieces of trim on, it's great to see this thing come together. At this point, I've been working on this for weeks, so it's nice to see some progress. Now I could have easily called this planter bench done, but that's not how I roll. The bottom of the planter is made of plywood, which is not waterproof, which means anything I store underneath the planter is going to get wet. So I use a silicone caulk to caulk up the edges, but that's not going to make it waterproof. So while the silicone dries, I want to add a drain to this planter. After some rummaging through my plumbing drawer, I found this PEX connector. I use a Forstner bit to drill about halfway through the plywood, and then use a smaller Forstner bit to drill all the way through. This lets the PEX connector sit flush with the surface while letting the PEX tubing through the plywood. In case you've never heard of PEX, PEX is a DIY-friendly way to run water lines throughout your home. Or in this case, drainage for your planter bench. So now the PEX connector acts as a drain, feeds it down the PEX tubing out the side of the bench. Now this still isn't waterproof. Plywood will eventually rot. So how do we avoid that? Our good friend Flex Seal. If you've never seen the infomercials, Flex Seal is rubber in a can. With the caulk sealing up the corners, I can pour a heavy coat of Flex Seal into the planter. Using a chip brush, I build it up about 3 inches around the sides. Then, I give it the old sniff inspection. It smells pretty good. While the Flex Seal is drying, I add some handles to the doors, latches, and of course, more solar lights. I'm never going to stop putting them on my projects. Now that the Flex Seal coating is dry, I can add in my planters. Since the planters are removable, I can take them out for winter, or I can replant them and not have to worry about messing with the bench. But now it's time to test it out, so I'll add a couple camp chairs underneath and start watering the flowers and see if anything drains through. I give the plants a good soak and nothing's coming through the bottom, it's all going out the drain. Though I won't store the family valuables under the bench, I'm confident that things will stay as dry as they need to be. I don't plan on staining the bench this year, it still needs some time to dry out. Maybe next year.
So this is it. Now the big question with a project like this is how long did it take and how much did it cost? All in, took me about 40 hours, maybe 50, so not too bad, but it certainly was a project. As for the cost, $800 all in. You might ask yourself, how the hell did he spend $800 on this thing? Well, lumber is expensive, especially when it's pressure treated. When you buy 4x6s and extra thick deck boards, it all adds up real fast. $200 for screws, sandpaper, bolts, Flex Seal, caulk, handles, you name it. Those little things add up. $200 for plants. Way more than I thought. I'm not going to the big box store for plants anymore. Rookie mistake, and I made it. I'm not doing it again. Could have saved a few bucks, whatever. In the end, this is a really nice place to sit. I love sitting out here. On a day like today, a nice cool fall day, it's a good place to be, and I'm glad I built it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.